It is a new day. I got this seat frame made. I was gonna start putting it in right now, but I started discovering some other issues when I started fitting everything up. Let's go over that right now. The seat frame has to go somewhere in here, and I wanted to put the fuel tank right in here underneath the steering wheel, but I'm running into issues where that fuel tank's actually hitting the steering wheel and it's interfering with these brackets. So this fuel tank is significantly bigger than I thought it was. You can see it's hitting the steering wheel, it's hitting these support bars in the back. It's just not gonna work. And I do want to try to reuse this thing, and I think we're gonna have to mount this the same way that it came out of the original go-kart. There's this slot in the back here, and that'll fit over the steering column. And then we're gonna have to build 2 bars that come up, and they'll sit inside these grooves, and that's what's actually gonna hold this whole steering bracket on. I'm gonna go ahead and get all this cut out. I'm gonna take the fuel tank and fit it back up to see if it works. And then while I'm cutting everything, I'm also gonna be removing this gusset right here. I wanna add 2 support bars in here, and we might gusset it later, but right now this is just too big and it's in the way. So we can start to see how all this is going to go together. We got our tank sitting here with that notch cut out where that steering column goes through. Hopefully this tank is not too close to the engine, because if it is, it'll probably melt and catch this whole thing on fire. But there's really only one way to find out if that's going to be the case, and that's to run this thing. Now the exhaust we're going to run somewhere else, hopefully away from this fuel tank, so I'm not worried about that. And then we got this whole thing sitting on this piece of 16 gauge sheet metal. And then we got our support pieces, which are gonna run down here, and we'll have to attach those little pins from the old go-kart somewhere down in here. You can see we're still very tight up here with this cap, but I can raise the steering wheel a little bit and make it clear that way. And also I plan on lowering this tank. Once this piece of sheet metal is cut down to fit in that groove, this tank will sit a little bit lower, so I'm hoping that'll be enough to clear it. So we're gonna go ahead and get this piece of sheet metal cut out. The plate is in, and this gas tank's sitting in here pretty nicely. I believe we'll be able to get this steering wheel to sit high enough to clear that gas cap. We may just have to extend that tube, and then we might also have to create some sort of quick release system so we can pull that steering wheel off, just so we can get some gas in this thing. Now this support here doesn't fall in line with any of the tubes, so unfortunately we're gonna have to create some sort of cross member that goes right next to this one, but that way we'll be able to weld these pins on, and then these pins are just gonna hold these tubes, and we'll have a bolt through there. That way if we need to remove this tank, we'll be able to pull that tube off, slide it out, and get this tank off. I'm gonna get this tube cut and get this cross member in. Looks like our cross member is going to work right there, so I'm going to get that tacked in. And then we also need to trim down this sheet metal, and we need to start trimming these pins and getting them tacked in. And once we get that cross member in, we are going to lose access to this weld right here, so I'm going to get that welded up. Pins are nice and cleaned up, and I did have to do a little weld buildup on the bottom of these. These were cut with some notches in them to fit that old frame. Those are no longer needed, and they won't line up with what we're trying to do. So now that they're nice and flat, we'll be able to stick them on this frame however we want, and then underneath these gaps we'll be able just to fill them in with weld. Not a big issue. We'll get our fuel tank back on here. We'll cut some uprights to put into these pins, and then we'll go ahead and get these pins tacked in, and then we'll have to notch the sheet metal here so it fits around that pin. Running into a slight issue right now. Our steering shaft is actually too steep. You can see it's hitting our valve cover right there. And I believe what's causing that is this plate down here is sitting on top of the frame. We actually need the front of this gas tank to sit below the frame, so I'm gonna have to trim that plate so it's at an angle like this, and that'll pull these arms in a little bit so that they can attach to our cross member. But then it'll also pull this steering joint out a little bit, and it'll make that less steep, and it should give us enough clearance to clear this valve cover. Now I'm gonna pull this plate out and show you exactly what I mean with that gas tank kind of sitting down in there. Kind of an extreme example, but you can see I removed this plate and the front of that gas tank is sitting at the bottom of the frame. This angle is much better here, and we have plenty of room in between this valve cover and our steering joint. Now the issue with this is our gas tank is currently sitting in there pretty cockeyed. On this one side, we actually had this like little bubble in the gas tank. I can't modify the gas tank, but I can modify this frame. So I'm thinking I'm gonna cut a little slight semicircle out of this frame to allow for that little bump in the plastic, and that should allow this gas tank to sit in here much straighter, and it'll also let it sit down a little bit, and then we'll get this plate modified so that it can sit at an angle like so. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty nervous. I'm gonna notch this frame right in here. Hopefully that works. If it doesn't work, then yeah, it's not gonna be an easy thing to fix, but oh well, at least I tried. A little out of bit trimming later, our plate is now sitting at that angle where it's touching the bottom of this tube and the top of this tube. Let's get the fuel tank in and see how everything looks. This is significantly better. Our tubes are perfectly lined up with our cross member. This part of the tank is sitting below the frame. This part is sitting on top of the frame, and our steering shaft has plenty of clearance in between it and this valve cover. I believe this is where we're gonna leave it. Let's get all this tacked in. First thing I gotta do is cap off this part of the frame, so I'm just gonna use some of this sheet metal here, and I'm just gonna build myself a plate that'll go across there, and it'll fill in these little areas here. So here's the little insert piece I made. So I am going to use this magnet to help hold it, and this will just slip right in here and get tacked into place. I had to put everything back in. I wanted to be 100% sure I had plenty of clearance around there and everything looked good before I welded it. All looks good, so we're going to weld that in. So based on the fact that I am wearing a different shirt, you can probably tell that it is a new day for me. So let's go ahead and get all those brackets in for the fuel tank. That way we can get that thing hooked up. We're trying to remember where I left things off. So this plate needs tacked in first, and then we can put our pins in those tubes that hold the fuel tank on. So let's go ahead and get all this stuff cleaned up and get all that tacked in. Got the tank and all that back in, and then now I can go ahead and tack these pins in. I am gonna have to do it with all this assembled, so hopefully I don't catch anything on fire. And then the only other thing I gotta look out for is these pins have slots in them. I just gotta make sure I line those up. And then after I do that, this steering, we know that has to be extended. So I'm gonna be using this tube right here to extend that steering. I got the steering shaft all cleaned up, good to go. And who knows, I might just have to leave it like this. I could roll around like the cool kids, like all the Harley guys with the monkey bars or whatever they call them, with their hands way up high. That's how I could drive my go-kart, just with the steering wheel way up here. That's ridiculous. I'm gonna cut it. Trimmed it up a little bit. Now that steering wheel is still high, so I'm gonna take everything off, and then I need to fill in these two holes up in here where that old steering wheel used to mount. Not too bad of a day, guys. So we took a couple steps back, tearing out our steering, but now look at us. We got our fuel tank in, we got our steering back in, and next week we're gonna be working on that seat. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys then.